Hiya. I am just going to do a quick video on my fear of hunger. A bit of paper. I'm just going to use. Here he is. So Jane Day has asked me, she asked me, am I afraid of being hungry? So I'm going to do a little video on my fear of hunger, and kind of the processes surrounding that. I'm also going to do this video because it's Friday night. I've got my evening meal is planned to be chili and hummus and chips. I'm going to start that in a bit. I'm quite hungry. I've had my hi-fi bar just as I've come back from school with the kiddies. I've done pretty well. I've got 7.5 in so far, and so 1.5 healthy extras. So healthy extra B's, that is. So I'm doing pretty well. The kiddies have asked. I'm going to make. So they're going to have a bit of tea now. I'm going to make them some little pancakes. I'm going to make them some pancakes with some flour. I've got no milk, so I'm going to make some flour, some egg, and my daughter's asked, I was going to make it just with water. My daughter's asked to try it with some almond milk, so I'm going to make some almond milk. And I'm going to make some pancakes with some almond milk. I'm tired, it's Friday. I've got some food that's going to come later. I'm going to be able to sit down and eat it properly. I don't have to rush about this. I don't have to get the kids to bed first before I eat. So it's going to be a very relaxed evening. So I know I can eat later quite comfortably. But I will very likely want to eat these once they come off. So I'm going to do a video at the same time. So that's kind of a way of keeping me focused on what I'm doing today. So I think I'm just going to start at the beginning. My history with food is that my dad was very keen on us being healthy eaters, which was very, very, very good. He had an element of never really having a lot of food for us. He didn't like to eat a lot of food. I'm going to drink my squash as well at the same time. So he always, whenever we ate, it was always a small amount of food. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. My mum, on the other hand, I'm just going to grab my eggs. And my almond milk. My mum, on the other hand, was quite, like, she didn't really have that much issue around food, and she was kind of, you know, she would feed us well. You know, there was no real limitations on what we could eat or how much we could eat. It was all so I had a tiny element whereby there was an element of gorging around my mum's food and an element of restriction. Neither one extreme, like totally, you know, neither one extreme, but there was an element of that growing up. And when I hit to be a teenager, I spent a lot of time, I think maybe about 14 or so, I ended up spending a lot of time in the local town, kind of, you know, being a teenager, doing teenagery things, spending time around people's houses, you know, going around to see friends, meeting new friends. I was only 14 at the time, obviously didn't have my own money, so I spent a lot of time hungry. I didn't eat very, you know, you were around people's houses, I felt a bit nervous to ask for food, so I just spent a lot of time being hungry. And I think at that time, when I was about 14, I got really skinny. And I remember I remember my school photo from when I was about 14. I was really, really thin around the face. My body was very thin, and I think I must have been kind of close to 9 or 10 stone at that stage when I was about 14, 15. And I think I just remember just being so very, very cold and very hungry over the years of kind of 14, 15, 16. I just remember not having control of my own food. I had to, you know, you're asking people. I didn't have any money to buy my own food, and so the food was few and far between. And I think once I hit the ability to kind of make my own decisions a bit more, I wasn't kind of in teenage mode as much. I started, you know, it was post-college, and, you know, I lived on my own in the kind of the local city, and moved in with some flatmates, and we did the whole kind of, you know, my next course and stuff like that, and I started to eat more and more. And I think I've always had, from that point, I don't as much now because I've worked through a lot, but I always remember just being nervous when I didn't have food nearby. I didn't, you know, that teenagehood was filled full of being quite uncomfortable around food, and, you know, it's an awkward stage, isn't it, when you're a teenager? And I'll sort of mix those together. So I've got one egg, a little sort of heap spoon of that with some flour, and I've just kind of dumped some almond milk in. So that's nearly there now, just mixing it up so it's not all lumpy. And so I think I developed a sense of wanting to make sure I always had food around. I didn't like to go for a walk without having sweets in my pocket. I didn't like to kind of go too long without eating, and I liked to make sure I ate plenty when I ate some food. And I certainly didn't at all worry about like putting weight on, because it had never been an issue for me before. I didn't realise, you know, there's an element I didn't even realise, like what a diet was, or that I was too big. Or I remember weighing myself at my grandma's house once and finding out I was 12 stone and being like, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm 12 stone. I feel absolutely huge, because I think we were all weighing ourselves, and I remember my dad weighed like 10 stone, and I thought, oh my god, I weighed 2 stone more. I can't believe. I was really mortified. Couldn't believe it. But at that point I didn't really know what to do about it or what it really meant. So I think yeah. And then obviously once I got kids, I then developed a bit more of a fear of hunger in terms of like if you're stuck breastfeeding and you can't eat, so I'd make sure I ate, you know, always have snacks on hand and make sure I ate before I fed, or, you know, things like that. Because I remember when I breastfed, I felt sick. I remember the feeling of the first letdown would just make you feel woozy and horrible. I remember that, and I remember wanting to make sure that I was never too far away from food. So, you know, it was I think in a way that's kind of why Slimming World works for me, because I know that if I do get hungry I can eat something, and I know that I can prepare by already eating something. So I think that does make a big impact for me. I'm trying to think what other examples of me of kind of my hunger issues. I think it's mostly that. I think it stems from being cold and hungry as a teenager, having a prelude of my dad having a sort of like a negative view of food, and my mum liking to feed us up and we could eat whatever we wanted, you know. There was no limitations, whereas my dad wanted us to make sure that we had healthy foods. So no crisps, no chocolate. My alarm going off mid-sentence. So yeah, I think that's what I feel about hunger. I would be fascinated to know. I mean, it feels like quite a early stage kind of look into that for me personally. It doesn't feel like, I feel like there might be more examples of of that, so I might do another video if I think of some more other things. I would be fascinated if you felt the same, if you feel like, I'm just looking at my little question. Jane Day, am I got a fear of hunger? So yeah, I'd like to know your history with your fear of hunger. I'd like to know that, and I'd like to know, are you afraid of being hungry? You know, and the types of maybe some experiences that you found yourself in terms of being hungry. Yeah, in the later stages of mine with my kids, not really knowing when I might be able to sit down and have a meal next. You know, when was I going to get a chance to eat something? And I think I gave up quite a lot on eating. I think certainly Slimming World brought back to me my ability to be selfish and just eat some food when it's time for me to eat my food. I think having kids, often you end up just giving them your food, and you know, you just go, I can't be bothered to even eat because they're going to want to eat all my food anyway, so why bother even? And you know, I think there's an element of Slimming World has helped me regain an ability to be selfish with my own food, so that if it's on my plate, I'm eating it. They've got their own plate, etc., so they can eat their food. So I think a bit of a tangent, but okay, then I'm going to finish it because I'm going to go and fry these little pancakes now. And thank you so much for listening. It's been nice to probe a little bit more into my head, to help me out on this point here. I get a little bit introspective, and that can often lead to overeating, so it's been nice to just chat about my feelings to help me calm down and relax. So I should be able to do these pancakes and then chop some potatoes into chip shapes, ready for making some wedges, hummus and chili. So I will speak to you all soon. Lots of love. Bye.